So I had a wonderful question last week from Tracy. Thank you, Tracy. Tracy walked a Camino 20 years ago, and she has read a little bit about how people feel let down at the end of the Camino, and it's all a bit of an anticlimax, and wants to hear about that. What's it like finishing in Santiago? I think that's a great question, Tracy. So that's what we're going to be talking about this week. What's it like when you finish physically and emotionally? So thanks for your question, Tracy. I think it's a great one. I love questions like this because I love to talk about the sort of more emotional elements of the Camino, not just sort of boots and poles and packs all the time. So is it a thing? We will often hear about, the Camino Blues and Camino Anti-Climax. Is it a thing? So what I will talk to you about in this video is it a thing? What's been my personal experience of it? How do I cope with it? And a key message right at the end. And I've got a long list of notes, so hopefully I'm not going to ramble too much. So that's what we're going to go through. And Tracy, hopefully this will kind of put your mind at rest. So is it a thing? As always, these are my own experiences and perspectives. Everybody's experience is different. So if you have different experiences, love to hear down below, please do comment. So is it a thing? From my perspective, yes. And on my very first Camino in 2015, I was very conscious of it because like you, Tracy, I'd read about it. And I'd read about how people, when they finally finished in Santiago and entered the plaza, they kind of went, oh, and it wasn't quite what they expected. So for me, it's a thing. Maybe for a lot of people it's not. So let me just sort of tell you about my own experiences. And I think the fact that I knew it was a thing helped me because I knew what to expect. So that's why I want to really share this week, so that if you're concerned about that, you can be prepared for it. Sorry, I sound like a bit like an over-planner, I know, but it's good to share these experiences. Once you get out there, you do your own thing, okay? Your Camino is not going to be like my Camino. It's not going to be like anybody else's Camino. But anyway, here we go. So how did that sort of Camino Anti-Climax or Camino Blues manifest? So on my first one, I was walking from Saint Jean, so 800 kilometers. I was just enjoying the journey. Oh, was I so enjoying the journey, because I never expected to complete it. If you've seen some of my other videos, I started off injured and I just maximized every single day, and really for the first 3 weeks didn't think I would get to the end. So I wasn't thinking about the end, and I'd advise on a longer Camino particularly, don't think about the end, just enjoy the moment. How did things start to emerge then? Probably 200 kilometers from Santiago, I started to realize, whoa, this is going to be over soon. I'd at that point been walking for, I don't know, what, 3-4 weeks, probably 4 weeks at least. And you kind of reach that point. Sahagun is the midpoint of the Camino Frances. And once you reach Sahagun, you kind of think, oh, it's a bit of a countdown. There's less to go than I've already walked. And then I found when I'd hit about 200 Ks, it was kind of, yeah, this is starting to come to an end. And it kind of niggled me a little bit. And then probably when I hit Sarria at just over 100 Ks, it was like, oh, I know this is going to sound crazy because so many people, their Camino starts in Sarria. But for me, it was like, and if you've walked a longer one, you'll understand this. For me, it was like, here's the final stretch. This is the home straight. It's just 100 Ks now into Santiago. And that required a little bit of a different mindset because things were really starting to come to a close. And I didn't want it to end. Well, I kind of did and didn't. I was hurting so much, I knew that I couldn't do this much longer, but I didn't want the feeling to end, that emotional and spiritual journey. So I kind of had to switch into a different mindset 100 Ks out and sort of, I know it's ending soon, but, I want to let down gradually. I want to enjoy these last few days because it's not going to last much longer. And then 2 or 3 days out, yeah, it's like, it really is finishing soon. And then, oh, it's finishing tomorrow. And I recorded a video, I think, on my penultimate day, sort of reflecting on the journey. So I was kind of completing in my own mind as I was getting to Santiago. And then, of course, you reach the Monte de Gozo with those pilgrim statues, and you can just see the cathedral from there. I should remember this, but you've probably got a couple of hours to walk from there, less, hour and a half or something. So that really is then the closing stages. And that's quite a transformation because, people are starting to come together towards the end there, meaning that, there are more people. You come down off Monte de Gozo, and you cross over a big highway, and suddenly, there's lots of traffic and noise, and it's like, whoa, we're back to the world. It's quite a different feeling. And then you have quite a long walk into Santiago. Seems long. I should have looked at the actual distances. It's probably not more than 3 or 4 kilometres, but you're walking through the outer suburbs of Santiago, heading in towards the cathedral. There's lots of people, and suddenly life is very busy around you, and it's a very, very different feeling. And then as you get closer, probably from about 500 metres, you can see down the narrow street the cathedral. You see the towers of the cathedral, and that's an amazing feeling. It's like, whoa, I've actually made it. It's an incredible feeling. And then you wind through these little streets, and you come, generally, depending which Camino you're coming from, but from the Camino Frances, you'll come down quite a narrow street. You've got a big old monastery, which is now a hotel up on the right there, and then you come down through an archway, and there's usually people playing bagpipes and all that kind of stuff. So you come down through this archway into the plaza, and I always forget how to pronounce it, but where all of the pilgrims assemble. And depending on the time of day, time of year, that can be packed with people. And that can be a little bit of a challenge, because maybe you're arriving with a group, which is great, and you're celebrating as a group. There's groups everywhere. There's walkers, there's people with bikes, there's people who've walked on their own. There's lots of greetings going on. I haven't seen you for a week. Last time I saw you was in Porto Marin. Lots of people catching up. There's generally going to be people in the square that you recognise. I didn't have that on my first one because I was fairly injured by the end of it, and all the people I knew finished 3, 4, 5, 6 days ahead of me. And so that was a little bit different for me on that first one, because I came into the square and it was so busy with people, and I didn't know a soul. Because you're kind of walking down the Camino as a slug or a chunk of pilgrims, so you're seeing the same people quite often day in, day out. So if all those people are going past you, you're seeing new faces every day. And so as I finished, there was no one there that I knew. And I tell a lie, as I walked around Santiago afterwards, I met a couple of lovely ladies who I'd met a couple of days previously, and we stopped for coffee, and that was nice. But for me, that was quite a lonely feeling, because I'd finished the Camino. Quite often you want to share that joy and experience with people, and there was no one there that I knew to share that with. So, that was a little bit lonely. The next couple of times I'd walked with Pat, so we sort of celebrated together. So let me come back to how that feels, and I don't want to just kind of tie it to my own experiences, but as you come into the plaza, it's a big change. There's lots of people, the streets are busy, there's noises, there's music going on, shops, it's quite a touristy town, Santiago. And you're going to go through a range of emotions. So depending whether you've arrived on your own or with a group, you're going to be glad. I'd suggest that no matter what distance you've walked, your body is going to kind of go, well done, we can rest now. And there's that fantastic sense of achievement and having done something, quite challenging. It could be immensely challenging depending on the distance you've walked or your abilities and so on. So there's that immense pleasure and satisfaction of having done it. But it's mixed. I think there's generally a degree of sadness. I'd love to hear comments down below of people who've gone through this. And why sadness and letdown and anticlimax? I think particularly if you've walked a longer Camino, you've got into the groove and you've come to, most of us I think, come to love this simple way of life. Where we're in nature all day and just walking and the exercise, and we feel fitter, our minds are clearer, life I think can become just so much more simple and pleasurable. And I was extremely happy through my whole Camino. It might not come out through the videos, but I was. And then you hit this wall, and suddenly it's civilization. I'm coming back to the real world. I'm maybe you're coming back to a job or family commitments or all sorts of day-to-day pressures, and it's like, oh, I want that life back on the trail. So there's this kind of conflict going on in your head potentially. I really love that, but I want to get home and make, back to family and friends and all the rest of it, but I kind of don't quite want to let go of what I've experienced. So I think that's fairly normal. I don't think I'm particularly out of the ordinary or weird. Again, share your experiences down below, but I think that's where this sort of letdown and anticlimax happens, Tracy, to be honest, in that we're not quite ready to go home yet. And so how can we, I think that's perfectly normal. So how can we cope with that? So I was very lucky that through IVAS Forum and other things online, I was probably way over researched the Camino, but I was aware that this was going to happen. And so here's some tips of how I avoided that letdown being too sort of emotionally a roller coaster. Number one, absolutely, enjoy the journey. And I know everybody's Camino is different, and everybody has a different perspective on it. But for me, it is all about the journey, and particularly that first one, because I never really thought I would finish it. I set out to enjoy every day, and by that I mean enjoy the surroundings. Don't rush through the day. Take my time, stop to see interesting things, spend time with people. Stop for interesting meals, just enjoy every minute of it, because that's really where the joy is. It's in the journey, and it's not the destination. If you've never quite understood that saying, it's all about the journey and not the destination, you will understand it absolutely when you walk a Camino, because all the joy, for me anyway, is in the journey. Number two, accept that you might feel a little bit let down at the end. It's not going to come as a shock to you. It might not happen. But if you feel a little bit sad and you're not quite sure why and all the rest of it, it's normal. Don't let that sort of get you down. So I think if you kind of think this could happen, then you're kind of more prepared for it. I think the third thing for me is you need some kind of closure. And transition. And a lot of people talk about this online, so maybe I'll kind of handle that in two ways. So what do I mean by closure? So however long you've been walking, you've had this fantastic experience, you come into the plaza, bang, it's stopped. And you're standing there in the middle of the plaza, all these people, celebrating their completion, and what do you do now? There's no tape to run through, no checkered flag. There's nothing to sort of signify that it's all over and well done, Rob, and well done, Tracy. And, you're just kind of standing there and thinking, oh, when's my train go or my plane? So I think I think it helps to have some kind of closure process. So, you're going to go to the Pilgrim's office probably to get your Compostela, your certificate to show that you've walked, your distance certificate. I would, if you're religious or not, I would definitely say go to the cathedral for Mass. That's a really nice experience, not just to watch the Botafogo swinging, but just the whole Mass is really a beautiful thing to experience. I've been to that probably a dozen times. I go 2 or 3 times at the end of each Camino. Walk up behind the altar and hug the apostle, go down into the crypt and to where the remains of St. James are said to lie in that silver box. Do all of those things. It's all part of closure of your journey, I think. But still, on the first one, I felt something was missing. And so I've arrived in Santiago 3 times. How do I put this? I never feel the journey's quite complete, finishing in Santiago, I guess. I had hoped to walk to the ocean on my first one. My injuries wouldn't allow it. What I did on my first one, I thought, I still don't feel like this is over. You know, I kind of want a closing scene, you know? How is this really supposed to feel complete and over? And so I went down to the bus station and I got a bus to Murcia. The bus takes about an hour and a half. And looking at the schedules, I would have, I think, 3 or 4 hours in Murcia, and then I'd get a bus back. And I was actually quite sick with food poisoning at this point. So I got the bus out there, quite a quick journey through the lovely countryside, dumped off at the port in Murcia, and I walked to that beautiful chapel set on the rocks overlooking the ocean. And I sat on the rocks watching the waves come in from the Atlantic, and I just felt, this is closure. This feels like the finish. And it was an immensely satisfying feeling. You know, there were only 2 or 3 other people there. It was peaceful. You know, it was nature, not a busy town. It had the chapel was there. It just felt like a much better ending for me to the Camino. So, you know, if you have a spare day at the end, by all means, Santiago is a great town to walk around. It is a bit touristy for me. It's a beautiful place. But that trip out to Murcia was really a great closeout for me. And there's a couple of little cafes there, and you get lunch and stuff before you can come back on the bus. So it's an option. I haven't been to Finisterre yet, so I mean that could be another option, get out to the lighthouse at Finisterre. I quite liked Murcia in that it was very quiet and peaceful and not many people there. Hopefully I'm going to get a both next time. And then probably number 4 tip. It's going to sound a bit weird, but be grateful. I think the Camino, one of the best lessons of the Camino is it teaches us to be grateful for things, not expect things, and not to have expectations. And that's a huge lesson I've found on every single one. And I think whatever you get out of your Camino, don't go into it with expectations. You know, I've said this a few times, go into it with an open heart, open mind. Have no expectations of what it's going to be like. Don't get hung up on what other people's Caminos were like. You know, I'm just sharing my experience. Your Camino is going to be totally different. You know, I'm just sharing my experiences to say these are the sorts of things that can happen. You know, these are the sorts of things that happen to me. It doesn't mean that yours is going to be like that or should be like that. So have no expectations, and for whatever your Camino gives you, however it finishes, just be grateful for it. And I think that helps with that sort of emotional sort of turmoil that can happen towards the end. So there we go. Bit of a ramble, but I really appreciated that question, Tracy. I love those kind of questions. If you've got any more like that, throw them in. So what have I got down at the end of my summary? I think I've wrapped it up. So if you have, you know, any sort of concerns like that about the Camino, do please ask questions. Do please share your own experiences down below. And I'm quite happy for people to go, Rob, you're talking through your backside. You know, my experience was totally different. Everybody's experience is a bit different. You know, I can only share my own. But that's kind of how I go through it. The next one is going to be interesting for me. I forgot to turn my phone off, sorry. Why is that going to be interesting? It's longer. I'm older, it's more remote. So if you're planning your first Camino, I'm planning my 4th, and I'm probably just as nervous as you are, and I have lots of questions going through my mind, you know. Will I cope with 1,000 Ks? And I'm hoping to go out to Finisterre and Murcia at the end, so it'll be closer to 1,100, just over. I'm older, and my knees are not so good. Will I actually make it? How will I cope with the remoteness? I love the solitude and all the rest of it, but I'm worried I'm going to feel so lonely after a week. You know, also, what will the weather be like? You know, I'm scanning climatic conditions. I'm way overthinking it, you know. So there's all sorts of things that are going through my mind, and this is my 4th. So, you know, if you have concerns going through your mind for your first, you know, or second, as in your case, Tracy, you know, it's perfectly natural. So by all means, look around, read blogs, watch videos, ask questions, but don't be overly concerned about stuff. The Camino is not that hard. It can be quite hard physically. It's not that hard in terms of sort of planning and doing it. Pick a start point, pick an end point, turn up with your gear, walk, enjoy. Don't overthink it. But thanks for your question, Tracy. I think that was a great one. I've rambled enough. See you next week, folks.